Under the Industrial Disputes Act 1947, retrenchment of a workman is defined in which section? Section 200. Section 200 of the Industrial Disputes Act 1947 defines retrenchment as the termination by the employer of the service of a workman for any reason whatsoever, otherwise than as punishment by way of disciplinary action, with carved out exceptions. Under CRPC, an offence triable exclusively by the Court of Session must first be committed to it by which authority? Magistrate of the first class. Section 209 of the CRPC 1973 required a magistrate of the first class, on appearance of the accused before him, to commit a case exclusively triable by the Court of Session for trial, after compliance with the procedure in Section 208 or 207 and 208. The doctrine of lifting the corporate veil was recognized in the leading case of Solomon versus Solomon and Company Limited. House of Lords, laying down the principle of separate corporate personality, and is the starting point from which courts have evolved the exceptional doctrine of lifting the corporate veil. Under the Transfer of Property Act 1882, sale of immovable property is defined in which section? Section 54 of the Transfer of Property Act 1882 defines a sale of immovable property as a transfer of ownership in exchange for a price paid or promised, or part paid and part promised, and prescribes the mode of effecting it. A is the correct choice. Under the Companies Act 2013, the minimum number of directors required for a public company is 3. Section 149 1A of the Companies Act 2013 mandates a minimum of 3 directors for a public company. Order 7 of the Code of Civil Procedure 1908 deals with which aspect of civil pleadings? Order 7 of the CPC contains the rules governing the form, contents, particulars, return and rejection of a plaint, including the requirements to state the cause of action and jurisdictional particulars. D. Plaint is the correct choice. Dying declaration is admissible under which section of the Bharatiya Sakshya Adhiniyam 2023? Section 26 of the BSA 2023 deals with statements by persons who cannot be called as witnesses, including dying declarations, mirroring Section 32(1) of the Old Evidence Act. So, Section 26 or B is the correct choice. Which article empowers Parliament to legislate on a state subject in the national interest upon a Rajya Sabha resolution? Article 249. Article 249 empowers Parliament to legislate on any matter in the state list if the Rajya Sabha passes a resolution by 2/3 majority declaring it expedient in the national interest. Choice A is the correct choice. Article 249. Rajat snatches Priya's mobile while running past her. Under BNS 2023, the specific offence of snatching is defined under Section 304. Section 304 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023 carves out snatching a distinct newly codified offence with its own punishment separate from theft and robbery. Section 304, choice A is the right choice. Under the Indian Penal Code 1860, Section 375 dealt with which offence prior to BNS replacement? Rape. Section 375 of the Indian Penal Code 1860 defined the offence of rape, and after the Criminal Law Amendment Act 2013 was substantially expanded, the BNS now recodifies this offence in Section 63. Under the Information Technology Act 2000, punishment for identity theft is provided under which section? Section 66C of the Information Technology Act 2000, inserted by the 2008 amendment, specifically punishes identity theft, that is fraudulent or dishonest use of another's electronic signature, password, or any other unique identification feature. Section 66C, C is the right choice. An appeal from an order of the Bar Council of India in a disciplinary matter lies to which forum? Supreme Court of India. Section 38 of the Advocates Act 1961 provides for a statutory appeal to the Supreme Court of India against any order made by the Disciplinary Committee of the Bar Council of India in matters of professional misconduct. Under Section 11 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996, appointment of arbitrators is made by Section 11 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996, as amended, empowers the Supreme Court for international commercial arbitration and the High Court for domestic arbitration, or any person or institution designated by them, to appoint arbitrators where parties fail to agree. Maintenance to Muslim divorced woman during the Iddat period is governed by which act? Muslim Woman Protection of Rights on Divorce Act 1986 entails a divorced Muslim woman to a fair and reasonable provision and maintenance to be made and paid to her by her former husband within the Iddat period. A is the right answer. Public interest litigation in India derives its constitutional foundation primarily from which articles? Till in India has been developed under Article 32 related to Supreme Court and Article 226 matters that can be filed in High Courts through liberation of the rule of locus standi to permit any public spirited citizen to approach the constitutional courts. Article 32 and 226B is the right choice. Under the Hindu Succession Amendment Act 2005, daughters became co-parceners with rights equal to sons in joint Hindu family property. D is the right choice. Daughters equal to co-parcenary rights by birth in joint Hindu family property as confirmed in Vinita Sharma versus Rakesh Sharma 2020. Hindu joint family property. An appeal from an original decree of a subordinate court lies to the High Court under which section of CPC? Section 96. Section 96 of the CPC 1908 confers the substantive right of the first appeal from any original decree passed by a court exercising original jurisdiction. Section 96, choice C is the right choice. Which section of BNSS 2023 corresponds to the recording of statements by magistrate during investigation? Section 183 of the BNS 2023 governs the recording of confessions and statements by a magistrate during investigation, corresponding to Section 164 of the old CRPC. Section 113 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023 deals with which newly codified category of offence? Terrorist Act. Section 113 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023 codifies the offence of terrorist act within general criminal law for the first time, mirroring the substance of corresponding UAPA provisions. So D is the right choice. Under the Income Tax Act 1961, a residential status of an individual for tax purposes is determined by which section? Section 6 of the Income Tax Act 1961 lays down the test for determining the residential status of an individual, Hindu undivided family, firm and company, which in turn governs the scope of taxable income. A. Section 6 is the right choice. In Shreya Singhal versus Union of India 2015, the Supreme Court struck down which provision of the IT Act? In Shreya Singhal Union of India 2015, the Supreme Court struck down Section 66A of the IT Act 2000 as unconstitutional for being vague, overbroad, and violative of Article 19(1)A. Choice B is the right choice. Section 66A. Under the Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita BNSS 2023, an FIR for a cognizable offence is registered under which section? Section 173 of the BNSS 2023 governs the registration of information relating to a cognizable offence, FIR, corresponding to Section 154 of the old CRPC. So, Section 173, that is choice A, is the right choice. The Bar Council of India is established under which section of the Advocates Act 1961. Section 4 of the Advocates Act 1961 establishes the Bar Council of India as the apex statutory body of the legal profession with regulatory and disciplinary jurisdiction over advocates throughout India. Section 4D is the correct choice. The general exceptions of private defense of the body extends to causing death only in certain enumerated cases under Section 38 of the BNS 2023, corresponding to Section 100 IPC, enumerates the circumstances in which the right of private defense of body extends to causing the death of the assailant, such as reasonable apprehension of death or grievous hurt. Section 38 of BNS, that is choice C. An arbitral award may be set aside by the court under which sections of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996. Section 34 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996 sets out the limited grounds and procedure for challenging and setting aside a domestic arbitral award. B is the correct choice. Under the CPC, a temporary injunction may be granted by the court under which provision? Order 39, Rule 1 and 2 of the CPC empower the civil court to grant temporary injunction to preserve property in dispute or to restrain a property from causing injury pending the suit. C is the right choice. Order 39, Rule 1 and 2. Under the Indian Contract Act 1872, an agreement in restraint of trade is, save certain exceptions, declared. Section 27 of the Indian Contract Act 1872 declares every agreement by which any person is restrained from exercising a lawful profession, trade, or business to be void, save for the statutory exceptions relating to sale of goodwill. So, choice D is the right choice. Punishment for professional misconduct of an advocate by the State Bar Council is provided under which section? Section 35 of the Advocates Act 1961 empowers the State Bar Council on receipt of a complaint or otherwise to refer the case to its disciplinary committee and impose punishment on an advocate found guilty of professional or other misconduct. Section 35, choice A is the right choice. Under the Indian Contract Act 1872, an agreement without consideration, with certain exceptions, declared to be void. Section 25 of the Indian Contract Act 1872 declares that an agreement without consideration is void, save for the statutory exceptions of natural love and affection, past voluntary services, and time-barred debts. Choice D is the right choice. Which schedule of the Constitution contains provisions regarding disqualification of legislators on grounds of defection? The 10th schedule. Choice A. The 10th schedule, inserted by the 52nd Constitutional Amendment in in 1985 contains the anti-defection provisions disqualifying legislators who defect from their political parties. The 10th schedule, choice A, is the correct choice. Under the Indian Succession Act 1925, a will must be attested by at least how many witnesses to be valid? Section 63 of the Indian Succession Act 1925 requires that a will, other than a privileged will, be attested by 2 or more witnesses, each of whom has been the testator signed or affixed his mark or has received a personal acknowledgement of his signature. 2 witnesses. Suresh, an attorney, divulges his client's communication in court. Such privileged communication is protected under Section 132 of the Bharatiya Sakshya Adhiniyam 2023, and this protects communications made by a client to his attorney in the course of and for the purpose of his professional employment corresponding to Section 126 of the Old Evidence Act. Section 132 of BSA, choice B. Under BNSS 2023, every accused must be produced before a magistrate within how many hours of arrest? 24 hours. Choice C is the right choice. Article 22(2) of the Constitution and Section 58 of the BNSS, carrying forward Section 57 of CRPC, require that every person arrested without warrant be produced before the nearest magistrate within 24 hours of arrest, excluding journey time. An arbitration agreement under the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996 is defined in which section? Section 7 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996 defines an arbitration agreement as an agreement by the parties to submit to arbitration all or certain disputes which have arisen or may arise between them, and requires it to be in writing. Under BSA 2023, accomplice evidence is dealt with by which section, providing its admissibility? Section 138 of the Bharatiya Sakshya Adhiniyam 2023, mirroring Section 133 of the Old Evidence Act, declares an accomplice is a competent witness against the accused, and a conviction is not legal merely because it proceeds on his uncorroborated testimony. Income from house property is computed under which head of the Income Tax Act 1961? Sections 22 to 27 of the Income Tax Act 1961 form the chapter on income from house property. Choice A is the correct choice. Section 35 of BNSS 2023 deals with the power of police officers to make arrests. It corresponds to which CRPC section? Section 41 of CRPC. Section 35 of the BNSS 2023 deals with the situation in which a police officer may arrest a person without a warrant, corresponding closely to the Section 41 of the old CRPC, with refinements introduced of the Arnesh Kumar guidelines. Confessions made to a police officer are admissible under which provisions of the Indian Evidence Act 1872? Inadmissible. Section 25 of the Indian Evidence Act 1872 expressly rendered inadmissible any confession made to a police officer. Inadmissible according to Section 25. Aarti seeks divorce from Rajesh on the ground of cruelty. Which section of the Hindu Marriage Act applies? Section 13(1)(IA) of the Hindu Marriage Act 1955 expressly recognizes cruelty, mental or physical, by either spouse after the solemnization of marriage as a ground for divorce. Choice C is the right choice. Under BSA 2023, electronic records are placed at par with documentary evidence under which provision? Section 61 of the BSA 2023 expressly recognizes electronic and digital records as admissible evidence with the same legal effect as paper records, treating them as primary evidence. Section 61. Under which article can the President declare a national emergency on grounds of war or external aggression? Article 352. Article 352 empowers the President to declare a national emergency if he is satisfied that a grave emergency exists by reason of war, external aggression, or armed rebellion threatening the security of India or any part of it. Under the 2013 Land Acquisition Act, social impact assessment for land acquisition is mandated under which section? Section 4 of the Right to Fair Compensation and Transparency in Land Acquisition Act 2013 makes the conduct of a social impact assessment study mandatory whenever the appropriate government proposes to acquire land for a public purpose. Section 4, C is the right choice. The Goods and Service Tax (GST) was introduced in India by which constitutional amendment? GST was introduced in India by the Constitution 101st Amendment Act 2016, which inserted Article 246A, 269A and 279A to create the constitutional framework for the Goods and Services Tax. D is the correct choice. 101st Amendment Act 2016. Sunita files a suit at Pune for breach of a contract executed at Delhi and to be performed at Mumbai. Jurisdiction lies. Section 20 of the CPC permits a suit to be filed where the cause of action wholly or in part arises. So for a contract executed at Delhi to be performed at Mumbai, jurisdiction lies either at Delhi or at Mumbai and not at Pune, where neither party resides nor cause of action arose. Under Section 111 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023, which offence is specifically codified as a distinct crime, organized crime. Section 111 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita 2023 introduces organized crime as a distinct codified offence in general criminal law for the first time. Inherent powers of the civil court to make orders necessary for ends of justice are saved by which provision? Section 151 of the CPC saves the inherent powers of the civil court to make such orders as may be necessary for the ends of justice or to prevent abuse of the process of the court. The doctrine of legitimate expectation in administrative law was recognized by Indian courts primarily through which case? Union of India versus Hindustan Development Corporation. In Union of India versus Hindustan Development Corporation, 1993, the Supreme Court formally recognized and elaborated the doctrine of legitimate expectation as a facet of natural justice and judicial review of administrative action. Anita, aged 17, enters into a contract to purchase a bicycle under Indian Contract Act. The contract is void ab initio. In Mohori Bibi versus Dharmodas Ghosh, 1903, the Privy Council held that a minor's agreement is void ab initio because Section 11 of the Indian Contract Act 1872 confines contractual capacity to persons of the age of majority. Under BSA 2023, the burden of proving facts, especially within knowledge of a person, lies upon which party? The person within whose knowledge it is. Section 109 of the BSA 2023, corresponding to Section 106 of the Old Evidence Act, places the burden of providing any fact, especially within the knowledge of a person, upon that person as a practical exception to the general rule of burden. Under the Bharatiya Sakshya Adhiniyam 2023, the term evidence is defined under which section? Section 21E of the Bharatiya Sakshya Adhiniyam 2023 defines evidence to include all statements that the court permits or requires to be made before it by witnesses, oral evidence, and all documents including electronic and digital records produced for inspection, documentary evidence. A restitution of conjugal rights under the Hindu Marriage Act 1955 is provided under which section? Section 9 of the Hindu Marriage Act 1955 enables either spouse to apply to district court for restitution of conjugal rights. The polluter pays principle was authoritatively recognized by the Supreme Court of India, in which case? Indian Council for Enviro Legal Action versus Union of India. In Indian Council of Enviro Legal Action versus Union of India, 1996, the Supreme Court authoritatively applied the polluter pays principle. Under the Patents Act 1970, the term of a granted patent in India is 20 years from filing date. Choice C is the correct choice. Section 53 of the Patents Act 1970 provides that every patent granted in India shall be for a term of 20 years from the date of filing of the application. Amit, intending only grievous hurt, strikes Vijay, who unexpectedly dies. Under BNS, Amit is most likely guilty of culpable homicide not amounting to murder. Under the BNS, carrying forward IPC section 299-300, causing death with intention only of causing grievous hurt, but not with the intention or knowledge required for murder, amounts to culpable homicide and not amounting to murder. Under the Code of Criminal Procedure 1973, which section deals with inherent powers of the High Court? Section 482 of the CRPC 1973 saved the internal powers of the High Court to make orders necessary to give effect to any order under the Code to prevent abuse of process or to secure the ends of justice, now retained in Section 528 of the BNSS. Delegated legislation may be challenged on the ground that it is ultra-vires either the parent statute or the Constitution. Delegated legislation in India is open to judicial review on the dual ground that it is ultra-vires either the parent enabling statute or the Constitution itself. MC Mehta versus Union of India oleum gas leak case introduced which Indian principle replacing strict liability? Absolute liability. In MC Mehta versus Union of India oleum gas leak 1987, the Supreme Court evolved the rule of absolute liability for enterprises engaged in hazardous activities, dispensing with the exceptions to the strict liability rule in Rylance versus Fletcher. The right to education was inserted as Article 21A of the Constitution of India by which Constitutional Amendment Act? Okay. A. 86th Amendment Act in 2002. Guaranteeing free and compulsory education to all children between the ages of 6 and 14 years as a fundamental right. Soham registers Fit Life as a trademark for gym apparel. The Trademarks Act 1999 grants exclusive rights under Section 28. Section 28 of the Trademarks Act 1999 confers on the registered proprietor of a trademark an exclusive right to use it in relation to the goods or services for which it is registered and to obtain relief in respect of its infringement. Under Article 226 of the 226, a High Court may issue writs for enforcement of fundamental rights and for which other purpose. For any other purpose. D is the right choice. Article 226 confers on every High Court a plenary writ jurisdiction to issue directions, orders, or writs not only for the enforcement of fundamental rights but also for any other purpose wider than the Supreme Court's writ jurisdiction under Article 32. The principle of strict liability was first laid down in which leading English case? Rylance versus Fletcher. A is the right choice. The rule in Rylance versus Fletcher, 1868, was first established strict liability. The occupier who brings on his land and keeps there anything likely to do mischief, if it escapes, is prima facie liable for damage caused by its escape, subject to recognized exceptions. The directive principles of state policy are contained in which part of the Constitution of India? Part 4 of the Constitution of India, Articles 36 to 51, they contain the directive principles of state policy. Visakha versus the state of Rajasthan, 1997, is a landmark bill that laid down guidelines on which subject? In Visakha versus state of Rajasthan, 1997, the Supreme Court, through a bill under Article 32, laid down binding guidelines on prevention of sexual harassment of women at the workplace. C is the right choice. Sexual harassment of women at workplace. Under the Payment of Gratuity Act 1972, gratuity becomes payable after continuous service of at least 5 years. Choice A is the right choice. Which of the following is not a recognized ground for dismissal of a bill by Indian courts? Bill has been deliberately decoupled from the orthodox locus standi rule. A public-spirited, non-aggrieved citizen acting bona fide is in fact entitled to maintain a bill, so this can never by itself be ground for dismissal of an otherwise genuine bill. So C, petitioner is a non-aggrieved citizen. Under BNSS 2023, time-bound trial in summons case mandates conclusion within how many years from the framing of charges? Section 346 of the BNSS 2023 introduces for the first time a statutory outer time limit of 3 years from framing of charges for completion of trial in summons cases, with exceptions only for recorded reasons. Under the Indian Evidence Act 1872, Presumption of legitimacy of a child born during marriage is provided in Section 112 of the Indian Evidence Act 1872. It raised a strong presumption of legitimacy in favor of a child born during the continuance of a valid marriage between his mother and any man, rebuttable only by proof of non-access. The doctrine of res judicata is codified under which section of the Code of Civil Procedure 1908? Section 11 of the CPC codifies the doctrine of res judicata, barring courts from trying any suit or issue that has been finally decided between the same parties by a competent court. Which section of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023 defines and punishes the offence of cheating? Section 318 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023 is a recodified provision dealing with cheating and dishonestly inducing delivery of property. Section 318 C is the right choice. Under Section 89 CPC, the court may refer disputes to which alternative methods of dispute resolution? D. Arbitration, conciliation, mediation, and judicial settlement, including Lok Adalat. So choice D is the right choice. Next question. #71. Trial of warrant cases instituted on a police report is governed by which chapter of the BNSS 2023? Chapter 19 of the BNSS 2023 is specifically titled Trial of Warrant Cases by Magistrates and lays down two streams of procedure. One for cases instituted on a police report and another for cases otherwise instituted. Subpenda relationship under Section 3 of the Hindu Marriage Act 1955 extends through how many generations on each side? Section 3F of the Hindu Marriage Act 1955 defines the Subpenda relationship as extending up to the third generation through the mother and the fifth generation through the father, both inclusive of the person concerned. Under the Negotiable Instruments Act 1881, dishonor of check for insufficiency of funds is an offence under Section 138. Section 138 of the NI Act 1881 specifically criminalizes dishonor of a check for insufficiency of funds or because it exceeds the amount arranged to be paid, treating it as a quasi-criminal offence. Under the Consumer Protection Act 2019, the pecuniary jurisdiction of the District Commission is up to Rs 50 lakhs. Following the 21 notification under the Consumer Protection Act 2019, The District Commission exercises pecuniary jurisdiction over consumer disputes where the value of goods or services paid as consideration does not exceed 50 lakhs. The Code on Wages 2019 consolidates and replaces how many earlier central labor enactments on wages? The Code on Wages 2019 consolidates and rationalizes 4 central enactments: the Payment of Wages Act 1936, the Minimum Wages Act 1948, the Payment of Bonus Act 1965, and the Equal Remuneration Act of 1976. Under the Legal Services Authorities Act 1987, the awards passed by Lok Adalats have the status of a decree of civil court. Section 21 of the Legal Services Authorities Act 1987 declares every award of a Lok Adalat to be deemed a decree of a civil court, final and binding on the parties, with no appeal lying against it. In which case did the Supreme Court relax the rule of locus standi to allow pill by public-spirited citizens? S.P. Gupta versus Union of India, popularly known as the Judges Transfer Case, Justice Bhagavati relaxed the traditional rule of locus standi, allowing any public-spirited person acting bona fide to maintain a pill for the enforcement of public rights. Choice C is the right choice. Under the Negotiable Instruments Act, complaint for check dishonor must be filed within how many days of cause of action? Under the proviso to section 142(1)(b) of the Negotiable Instruments Act 1881, a complaint for check dishonor must be filed within 1 month. Under the Special Marriage Act 1954, the minimum notice period required before solemnization of marriage is 30 days. Section 5 of the Special Marriages Act 1954 requires the parties to give a notice of intended marriage to the marriage officer at least 30 days in advance of the solemnization. A is the right choice, 30 days. In there is summoned by police to attend an investigation. Under BNSS, summons to witnesses is governed by Section 179 of the BNSS 2023 empowers a police officer making an investigation to require by written order the attendance of any person who appears to be acquainted with the facts and circumstances of the case corresponding to Section 160 of the old CRPC. Section 179D. Under Order 1, Rule 10 of CPC, the court may, at any stage of the proceedings, do which of the following? Order 1, Rule 10 of the CPC empowers the court at any stage of the proceedings and either on application or suo motu to strike out the name of any party improperly joined or to add the name of any necessary or proper party. An ex parte decree may be set aside by the defendant by an application under which order of the CPC? Order 9, Rule 13 of the CPC empowers the defendant to apply for setting aside an ex parte decree on proving that summons was not duly served or that he was prevented by sufficient cause from appearing when the suit was called on for hearing. The Right to Fair Compensation and Transparency in Land Acquisition Act came into force in which year? The Right to Fair Compensation and Transparency in Land Acquisition, Rehabilitation and Resettlement Act of 2013 was enacted in 2013 and came into force on the 1st January 2014 to replace the Colonial Land Acquisition Act of 1894. Which writ is issued to a public officer to compel the performance of a public duty owed to the petitioner? The writ of mandamus is a command issued by a constitutional court to any public authority, lower court or tribunal to compel the performance of a public or statutory duty which it has wrongfully refused or failed to perform. Under the Motor Vehicles Act 1988, claims for compensation for accidents are filed before which forum? Motor Accidents Claim Tribunal. Choice A is the right choice as per section 165 of the Motor Vehicles Act. In which case did the Supreme Court propound the basic structure doctrine limiting Parliament's amending power? The basic structure doctrine was first propounded by a 13-judge bench in Keshwananda Bharati versus State of Kerala, 1973. D is the right choice. Keshwananda Bharati versus State of Kerala. The principle of AIBE alteram partem is a facet of which broader doctrine of administrative law? Natural justice. Choice B. The maxim AIBE alteram partem, here the other side, is one of the two foundational rules of the doctrine of natural justice in administrative law, the other being nemo judex in causa sua, rule against bias. B is the right choice. The provision for anticipatory bail under the Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita 2023 is contained in which section? Section 482 of the BNSS 2023 provides for grant of anticipatory bail by the High Court or Sessions Court to a person apprehending arrest in non-bailable offences. Under the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023, the offence of murder is punishable under which section? Section 103 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023 prescribes the punishment for the offence of murder, replicating the substance of Section 302 of the IPC 1860. So, Section 103C is the right choice. The doctrine of part performance under the Transfer of Property Act 1882 is contained in which section? Section 53A of the Transfer of Property Act 1882 embodies the doctrine of part performance, protecting a transferee in possession under a written but unregistered contract of transfer from being dispossessed by the transferor. Section 53A. Specific performance of a contract is granted by the court under which act in India? Specific Relief Act 1963. Comprehensively amended in 2018 is the principal statute governing specific performance and other specific reliefs in India. Conditions precedent to retrenchment under Section 25 AIBE of the Industrial Disputes Act 1947 include 1 month notice and retrenchment compensation. And notice to the appropriate government. So D is the right choice. Anand, an Indian citizen, is detained without being informed of grounds. Which fundamental right is primarily violated? Article 22. Article 22(1) guarantees to every arrested person the right to be informed as soon as may be of the grounds of arrest and to consult and be defended by a legal practitioner of his choice. Its breach is the central protection in such a scenario. Under the Goods and Services Tax Regime, GST, is levied concurrently by the center and state under which article? Article 246A, inserted by the 101st Constitutional Amendment in 2016, is a special source of legislative power that empowers both Parliament and the state legislatures to make laws with respect to goods and service taxes. Advocate Mehra accepts a brief and later represents the opposing party in the same matter. He is guilty of professional misconduct. Choice A is the right choice. Rule 33 of Part 6, Chapter 2 of the BCI rules expressly bars an advocate, once retained, from appearing for the opposite party in the same matter. The National Green Tribunal was established under which legislation in India? National Green Tribunal Act 2010. B is the right choice. Under the Motor Vehicles Act 1988, third-party insurance for motor vehicles is mandated under which section? Section 146 of the Motor Vehicles Act 1988 mandates compulsory third-party insurance. No person shall use or cause or allow any other person to use a motor vehicle in a public place without a policy of insurance complying with the requirements of Chapter 11, Section 146. Under the Hindu Marriage Act 1955, the conditions for a valid Hindu marriage are enumerated in which section? Section 5 of the Hindu Marriage Act 1955 enumerates the conditions for a valid Hindu marriage. They are monogamy, soundness of mind, prescribed minimum ages, and absence of prohibited or subpoena relationships. Which article of the Constitution declares the procedure for amendment of the Constitution by Parliament? Article 368 of the Constitution lays down the procedure for amendment by Parliament, including the requirement of special majority and for certain federal provisions, ratification by at least one half of the state legislatures. Under the Code of Civil Procedure, jurisdiction of civil courts to try all suits of a civil nature is conferred by Section 9. Section 9 of the CPC mandates that civil courts shall have jurisdiction to try all suits of a civil nature unless their cognizance is expressly or impliedly barred by statute. So, correct answer is B, Section 9.